News now, of course, because sadly we've lost the wonderful and brilliant Downton Abbey icon that is Dame Maggie Smith. Now, a lot of people obviously always ask on these things, Neil, did you meet Dame Maggie Smith? I did. I was lucky enough to. One of these sort of characters that, shall we say, was as spiky as a role off camera as she was on camera, but you didn't mind it really, you know, that sort of thing. You kind of wanted her to be the same character. It's fascinating though, because of course it's generational, isn't it? Many people only remember in the role that's the last one. For quite a few people, of course, they'll think Sister Act, many others think Harry Potter, and then all thanks to the phenomenal success of Downton Abbey, you then instantly think of that role. But you see, she wasn't a huge fan of television. She said there was a lot of waiting around, and the fact that the story never really concluded, she found it very hard. Exactly, it's very hard in television, let me tell you. But what's interesting about Dame Maggie is, well, she could have become something a little bit earlier in one of those period dramas. Let me explain. Hi, good morning, nice to see you. Thank you so much as ever for your time. It is sad, isn't it, when you lose somebody that you like, of course, particularly an actress or an actor that we've enjoyed their work for so many years. You just kind of think, well, they're part and parcel of the fabric. I was very lucky enough to meet one of her very big best chums, none other than Kenneth Williams, the Carry On star, you know. And I literally met him at the very start of my, coming to London and trying to get into the world, or further world, should I say, of show business. He was very kind to me, very sweet, and he spoke very openly about Dame Maggie and what good friends they were, and she equally liked him. One of the rare two that actually got on in the world of show business. I don't mean that cruelly, but you know, normally they're just together. These two were genuine friends, you know. He made her laugh, she made him laugh. Barbara Windsor too was a good friend of Maggie Smith, and I knew her very well, and she said there wasn't anybody quite like her. Now, what's interesting about Maggie is this, and I don't know if you know this, but one of her spectacular films was none other than the prime of Miss Jean Brodie. Now, way before my time, but of course I've seen it on TV, and I vaguely remember the sort of remake way back in the late 70s with Dorothy Tootin taking over the role. But at the height of that, you know, there she was, an international star, doing incredibly well. And part and parcel of the cast was none other than Gordon Jackson, along with his wife, Ronna Anderson. And they were married, yes, as I say, in real life. And then he went on to magnificent fame, all thanks to playing the sour and dour Butler in one of our favourite shows here on the channel, Upstairs, Downstairs. You never really saw him break character, did you? He was always very dour and very sort of miserable, even with Mrs. Bridges, who of course wasn't really Mrs. Bridges at all. I loved Upstairs, Downstairs, as many people know. But according to a well-placed source, well, Dame Maggie herself, she told me, according to Dame Maggie, she could have actually appeared in Upstairs, Downstairs. This is simply because way back when that show was being put together, it was made by a company called LWT. And people forget, you know, that LWT wasn't necessarily, that particular production wasn't really big money. It's very cheaply made if you look at it, but it was the acting and the storylines that made it so brilliant, as many people realise. Now, what happened was, because of Gordon's phenomenal success, he had the idea of inviting Maggie in, as she was at the time, basically just for a small cameo role. Maybe one of the friends of Lady Prue Fairfax, that type of thing. Not a big role, just something, you know, he wanted to work with her again. And according to sources, well, apparently LWT just didn't have the money. Now, she wasn't really looking for money, you know, she was kind of doing it as a favour to a chum. But the true story behind that was that they didn't really want big names. If you think about, you know, Upstairs, Downstairs, it was a lot of new ensemble, basically cheap, and also creating stars, beautiful people like Leslie Ann Down, the dapper Simon Williams, people like that. But they weren't really known on screen. And according to Dame Maggie, that's the reason why she was told, anyway, even a small cameo couldn't really happen inside Upstairs, Downstairs. Gordon was, well, you know, very upset, but he didn't have the power, even though he was the main star of the show. That's how show business works. Also, though, it's interesting to note that apparently, according to a source, Dame Joan Collins may have missed out on a place in Downton Abbey. And this is all to do with a spat between Dame Joan and Dame Maggie's son, Toby Stevens. You see, many years ago in a production that I was working on, Private Lives by Noel Coward at the Aldwych Theatre, well, Toby was simply a ticket stubber. Many years later, he mentioned the fact that it wasn't a spectacular production, and Joan came in a waft of hair lacquer. Well, Who's going to take on that, right? And it's fascinating to see that, while it was just a gentle theatrical sort of snap at each other, rather ungallant, I thought, of Toby to do that. But according to a source, basically Dame Maggie didn't really have much time for Dame Joan. And when it was mooted that perhaps, maybe Dame Joan could come in, ayla the role of maybe Shirley MacLaine in Downton Abbey, well, seemingly that sort of just was swept away. I can't think who by, can you? Who would want to cross the wonderful character from Downton Abbey? Either way, we're going to miss you, Dame Maggie. You were a brilliant actress and, of course, brought a lot of joy and a lot of fun and some brilliant acting to so many people over the years. Eventually, I'll try and find that particular interview with Dame Maggie Smith. But I'm sure for everybody here on this channel, let's send her very best, our very best, should I say, to her family and, of course, to all of her wonderful fans around the world. Neil Sean in the very heart of London.